My name is Loretta Jean Calloway, and I am 58 years old. For 31 years, I watched my younger sister collect every good thing our family had to offer: the college tuition, the beach vacations, the Sunday afternoon phone calls, the $340,000 our mother quietly transferred out of a joint account 9 months before she died. While I worked double shifts at the county hospital and told myself that love didn't have to be fair to still be love.
I was wrong about that.
And I spent a long time paying for that particular piece of wrong thinking. The morning I am going to tell you about happened on a Tuesday in March, the 14th, at 10 a.m. sharp, in the third-floor conference room of Whitmore and Greer, an estate law firm on Clement Street in Asheville, North Carolina. There were 11 people in that room. My sister Darla and her husband, Preston. My brother-in-law's business attorney, a man named Gerald Fitch, who wore a signet ring on his right hand and never once looked me in the eye. My mother's longtime financial advisor, a Mr. Raymond Caulfield. 2 paralegals. A court-appointed estate mediator.
And me.
I had driven 4 hours from Knoxville the night before and slept 6 hours in a Hampton Inn off the highway. I wore a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse and the small pearl earrings my grandmother had given me when I graduated nursing school. I carried a navy blue accordion binder with 12 tab sections. I had been building that binder for 4 years. What none of them knew, what Darla had not once considered in the 31 years she had been collecting everything that was meant for both of us, was that our grandmother, Vera Mae Calloway, had known exactly what kind of woman my mother would become. Vera Mae had known it decades before I did.
And she had done something about it.
Before I take you into that conference room, I want to pause for just a moment. If this story is already sitting somewhere familiar in your chest, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to Quiet Truth Stories. We put out new stories every week for people who understand that the truth has a way of arriving right on time, even when it takes 30 years to get there. Drop your city and what time it is where you are in the comments. I genuinely love reading those. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Back to a yellow kitchen in Kingsport, Tennessee, in the summer of 1973. My mother's name was Beverly Ann Calloway, née Pruitt. She was a beautiful woman in the way that some women are beautiful, like a piece of furniture is beautiful. You admire it. You arrange your life around it. And you never quite feel comfortable sitting down. She had dark hair, she said, in rollers every Sunday night. And she smelled like Chanel No. 5 and hairspray. And she kept the house so clean you were afraid to touch anything. My father, Earl Calloway, drove a propane delivery truck for 18 years and came home every evening smelling like metal and cold air.
He was a quiet man.
He laughed easily and apologized for things that weren't his fault and deferred to my mother in every room of that house as though she were the weather and he was just trying to stay dry. I was born in 1966. Darla came 4 years later, in 1970. From my earliest memory, the difference was visible. Not dramatic, not screaming, not the kind of thing you could point to on any given afternoon and say, "Look, there it is."
It was quieter than that.
It was in the distribution of small things. And small things, when they accumulate over years, become a geography. They become the landscape you live inside. My mother made Darla's birthday cakes from scratch. White cake with lemon curd filling and buttercream frosting, 3 layers, with Darla's name written in pale yellow cursive across the top. For my birthday, She bought a sheet cake from the Piggly Wiggly. It was fine.
It was perfectly fine.
The frosting was sweet and the cake was soft, and I ate 2 pieces and thanked her and did not say a word. But I noticed. I was 7 years old, and I noticed. And I filed it away the way children do, in that quiet internal ledger they keep before they even have words for what they're recording. When Darla was 12, my mother enrolled her in Miss Patrice's School of Dance on Broad Street. $40 a month for ballet and tap. I had asked the year before about piano lessons at the community center. $8 a month. And my mother had said we couldn't afford it. I was 13. I did the arithmetic even then. My father's mother, Vera Mae Calloway, lived 12 minutes away in a small white house on Laurel Branch Road that smelled like wood smoke and old books and the particular sweetness of dried lavender she kept in ceramic bowls on every windowsill. She was a retired schoolteacher. 4th grade. 33 years. She had a garden out back with tomatoes and collard greens and a fig tree she talked to like it was a member of the household. She wore her silver hair in a braid down her back, and her hands were always warm, even in winter. She was the first person in my life who looked at me like I was the whole point of the conversation. Every Saturday morning from the time I was 8 until I left for college, I walked to Vera Mae's house and spent the morning with her. We cooked. We read. She helped me with math and let me read anything in her bookshelf, which included things my mother would not have approved of and which I will not specify here except to say they were books that taught me that the world was larger and more complicated and more interesting than our yellow kitchen in Kingsport. She never said a single unkind word about my mother. But she saw what was happening. I know now that she saw all of it. When I was 16, she said something to me that I have carried in the front pocket of my mind for 42 years. We were shelling butter beans at her kitchen table, and I had just told her, without drama, without tears, that my mother had told Darla she could redecorate her bedroom and that I could pick out a new bedspread if I wanted. Vera Mae was quiet for a moment. She kept shelling. Then she said, "Loretta, the people who underestimate you are doing you a favor. Let them." I didn't fully understand it then. I do now. I graduated high school in 1984 with a 3.9 GPA. I had applied to 3 colleges, the University of Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and a small liberal arts school in Virginia I no longer need to name. My parents sat me down in May of my senior year, and my mother told me that they could help with some expenses, but that money was tight. She used the phrase, "money is tight," 4 times in that conversation. I counted. What she did not tell me, what I would not learn for another 30 years, was that she had already opened a separate savings account in Darla's name with $18,000 in it, designated for Darla's future education. Darla was 14 years old. I went to the University of Tennessee on a combination of academic scholarships, federal loans, and money I had saved from 3 years of working after school at the Kingsport Times-News, answering phones and filing. I studied nursing because I had always been drawn to the work of repair, to the idea that a person trained in the right way could walk into the worst moment of someone's life and make it more bearable. I graduated in 1988. I passed my boards on the first attempt. I called my parents from a payphone outside the testing center in Nashville. My mother said, "That's good, Loretta. Darla made the dance team at Dobbins Bennett. Did I tell you?" She had not told me. I said congratulations. I drove back to Knoxville and ate a bowl of ramen in my apartment above the Sudsy Duds laundromat on Magnolia Avenue and felt something I did not yet have the language to call grief. I want to stop here for just a moment, because I think some of you know exactly what that ramen tastes like. Not the noodles. The feeling. The particular loneliness of having done something real. Something hard. Something that cost you years of your life. And having the person who is supposed to witness it look right past you. If you know that feeling, type the word "seen" in the comments right now. I mean it. Because this channel exists for people who spent too long being invisible in the rooms that were supposed to love them most. Subscribe if you haven't already. There are more stories coming, and every single one of them is for you.
Now, back to the story.
I built my life in Knoxville the way you build something when you have no help and no net. Carefully, slowly, one solid piece at a time. By 1995, I was a charge nurse in the cardiac unit at the University of Tennessee Medical Center. By 2001, I was the nurse manager for the entire floor, overseeing a staff of 23 and a budget of $1.4 million annually. I was good at my work. I was precise and calm, and I did not panic in emergencies, which is a quality that sounds simple and is not simple at all. I had learned it in that yellow kitchen, in those years of noticing things and saying nothing and filing everything away. In 1993, I married a man named Thomas Brewer, a civil engineer from Maryville who built bridges for the state of Tennessee and made the best pot of coffee I have ever tasted in my life. He was patient and steady, and he thought I was funny, which is the thing I needed most and never expected to find. We bought a small house in West Knoxville in 1996 for $112,000. We did not have children, which was a grief of its own kind, and one I will not spend time on here except to say that Thomas and I found our way through it together and came out the other side with a marriage that was honest and warm and ours. My relationship with my parents during those years was what I would call managed. I called on Sundays. I drove to Kingsport for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I brought casseroles and sat at the table and participated in the performance of family. My mother talked about Darla constantly. Darla's new house. Darla's husband Preston's landscaping business. Darla's trips to Hilton Head. I listened. I asked questions. I did not compare. I had learned very early that comparison was a trap my mother had set, and I refused to walk into it. What I did not know during those years was what was happening to the money. My father's mother, Vera Mae, died on February 3rd, 2003. She was 81 years old. She had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure the previous spring, and she had declined slowly and with enormous dignity, the way she had done everything. I drove to Kingsport every weekend for the last 4 months of her life. I sat with her. I managed her medications. I talked to her doctors. My mother came once, for 45 minutes, and brought a flower arrangement from the Kroger on Stone Drive. Vera Mae died on a Tuesday morning at 6:22 a.m. I was holding her hand. 3 days after her funeral, her attorney, a man named Harold Steins who had been handling her affairs for 20 years, called me at my home in Knoxville. He told me that Vera Mae had left a will, and that I was named as the sole beneficiary of her estate, which included her house on Laurel Branch Road, her savings, and a small investment account. The total value was $87,000. He also told me that Vera Mae had left a letter, sealed, with instructions that it be given to me privately and not read in the presence of any family member. I drove to Harold Stein's office on a Thursday afternoon in February. He handed me a white envelope with my name written on the front in Vera Mae's handwriting. That careful, looping teacher's cursive I had known my whole life. I sat in the chair across from his desk and I opened it. I will not read you every word of that letter. Those words are mine. But I will tell you what she told me, because it is the spine of everything that followed. Vera Mae wrote that she had watched my mother for 30 years. She wrote that she had seen the way money moved in that house, away from me and toward Darla, and that she had spoken to my father about it more than once, and that my father, whom she loved and did not blame entirely, had not been able to change it. She wrote that she had kept records. She had kept records for 22 years, a small green ledger she had maintained from the time I was in high school, noting what she observed: the savings account for Darla, the dance lessons, the car my parents bought Darla at 17 while I took the bus, the $6,000 check my mother wrote to Darla for her wedding while I received a card with $200 cash. She wrote that she did not know what, if anything, I would ever be able to do with what she had seen. But she wanted me to know that she had seen it. She wanted me to know that she had always seen me. She also wrote that she had spoken to Harold Steins about something else. Something she had discovered 18 months before her death, when she had asked my father a direct question about their finances, and he had, in a moment of exhausted honesty, told her the truth. My mother had been transferring money. My father had opened a small investment account in 1981, the year I started high school. He had put $500 a month into it for 22 years. Money he set aside from his paycheck, quietly, without fanfare, because he wanted to leave something for both of his daughters. By 2002, with modest but consistent returns, that account held $213,000. My mother had moved $170,000 of it into an account in Darla's name over a period of 8 years, between 1994 and 2002. My father had not known the full extent of it until Vera Mae asked him directly. He was ashamed. He did not know how to fix it. He told Vera Mae he was sorry. She wrote that she believed him. She wrote that she had asked Harold Steins to document what my father had told her, in the form of a sworn affidavit, signed by my father, which Harold Steins had in his files. She wrote that she did not want me to use this to destroy anyone. She wrote, "Loretta, you do not need to burn anything down. You just need to know the truth. The truth has a way of doing its own work if you let it." I sat in Harold Stein's office for 22 minutes after I finished that letter. I did not cry. I looked out the window at the parking lot, and I counted the cars. There were 14. Then I asked Harold Steins for a copy of my father's affidavit. He had it ready. He had been expecting me to ask. I drove back to Knoxville in the dark. I did not call Thomas until I was home, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I didn't drink. When I told him, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" I told him I didn't know yet. I told him I needed to think. He put his hand on mine and left it there and didn't say anything else. And that was exactly right. I built the binder over the next 4 years. I want you to understand what I mean when I say I built it. I was not obsessed. I was not consumed. I went to work every day, and I managed my floor, and I came home, and I cooked dinner, and I lived my life. But on certain evenings, after Thomas was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table, and I worked. I gathered documents. I requested bank records using the information in my father's affidavit. I corresponded with Harold Steins, who was meticulous and patient and who had, I came to understand, loved Vera Mae like a member of his own family. I organized everything into 12 tab sections in a navy blue accordion binder I bought at an Office Depot on Cumberland Avenue for $7.49. Section 1. Vera Mae's letter. Section 2. My father's affidavit. Section 3. Bank transfer records. 1994 to 2002. Documenting the $170,000. Section 4. Documentation of the $18,000 savings account opened in Darla's name in 1984. Section 5 through 12. Everything else. The car. The wedding money. The beach trips charged to a credit card that my father paid and that I found records of in his old files, which he gave me access to in 2005, 2 years before he died, when he sat me down in his living room and told me he was sorry and meant it. My father died on March 9th, 2007. Lung cancer. Stage 4. Diagnosed in October of 2006. I drove to Kingsport every weekend. I sat with him. I managed his medications. I talked to his doctors. It was the same thing I had done for Vera Mae. And I did it for the same reason, because he was my father, and I loved him, and love is not a transaction, even when the people around you have treated it like one. 2 weeks before he died, he gave me a manila envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a copy of a document I had not seen before. A change of beneficiary form for a small life insurance policy he had taken out in 1988. A policy my mother did not know existed, with a face value of $45,000, naming me as the sole beneficiary. He had opened it the year I graduated nursing school. He had kept it at Harold Stein's office for 19 years. He said, "I know it doesn't fix it. I know that." I told him it didn't need to fix anything. I told him I had already fixed it myself. He cried. I held his hand. I did not cry until I was in my car in the parking lot of the Kingsport Hospital, and then I cried for about 3 minutes, and then I drove home. My mother called me 6 weeks after my father's funeral to tell me she was updating her will and wanted to know if I had any questions. I said I had no questions. She said that she intended to leave the house and its contents to Darla, as Darla was local and would be able to manage the property. She said she was leaving me a set of her mother's china and a cash bequest of $5,000. She said she hoped I understood. I said I understood perfectly. I did not tell her about the binder. I did not tell her about anything. I thanked her for calling and I wished her a good evening, and I hung up the phone. Darla called me the following week. We had a cordial relationship in the way that two people who have never actually been honest with each other can have a cordial relationship. Surface warmth.
Careful topics.
An unspoken agreement not to name the thing in the room. She told me she thought Mama's plan was fair. She said she hoped I wasn't upset. She said, "You've always been so independent, Loretta." Mama always said that. I asked her what she meant by that. She paused and then said, "Just that you never needed as much. You've always been fine on your own." I counted 7 seconds. Then I said, I'm sure that's true, Darla. And I ended the call. I want to stop here for one more moment, because I need to say something directly to you. If you have ever been called independent by someone who used it as a reason not to show up for you, if you have ever had your resilience used against you, as though surviving something without help meant you didn't deserve help in the first place, I want you to hear this. That is not a compliment. That is a justification. There is a difference. And the people who use it know the difference, even if they won't say so. Type the word strong in the comments if that sentence just landed somewhere real for you. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Every story here is built on the belief that the quiet ones are paying attention. Now let me finish this. My mother's health began declining in 2018. She had a series of small strokes that left her with some cognitive slowing and difficulty managing her finances. Darla became her primary caretaker,
which was appropriate.
She was local. She had the time. And she had, it must be said, been the favored one long enough that she had some obligation to show up for it. I drove to Kingsport once a month. I managed my mother's medication regimen and coordinated with her neurologist and reviewed her care plan.
My mother was,
in those years, sometimes warm with me in a way she had never been when she was fully herself. Whether that was the strokes or something loosening in her at the end of her life, I cannot say. In January of 2020, my mother's financial advisor, Raymond Caulfield,
called me.
He had been managing her accounts for 11 years. He told me that he had discovered, in the course of reviewing her estate documents, a series of transfers made in 2019, 9 months before her death, as it would turn out, totaling $340,000. Moved from a joint account she held with my father's estate into an account held solely by Darla. He told me he was legally obligated to flag this to the estate executor. He told me he was calling me because I was listed as co-executor on my father's original estate documents and because, in his professional opinion, I needed to know. I thanked him. I opened the binder. I added a 13th tab. My mother died on October 3rd, 2020. I was with her. Darla was there. We sat on opposite sides of the bed, and we held her hands, and we did not speak to each other. And my mother died at 4:47 in the afternoon with the October light coming through the window and a faint smell of lavender from the lotion I had put on her hands that morning. Whatever she had done, she was my mother. I let myself feel that. The call from Whitmore and Greer came in February of 2021. The will reading was scheduled for March 14th. Darla's husband Preston called me the week before, warm and friendly in that particular way of people who are confident they have already won, and said he hoped we could all handle this like adults and that he knew this was an emotional time and that he and Darla just wanted things to be settled cleanly. I said I was sure we all wanted that. I said I was looking forward to seeing everyone. I meant it. I drove to Asheville on the evening of March 13th. I ate dinner alone at a small Italian place 3 blocks from the hotel. A bowl of pasta, a glass of water, a piece of tiramisu I barely touched. I went back to my room and I opened the binder and I read through each of the 13 tabs in order. The way I had done perhaps 40 times over the years. Not because I needed to refresh my memory, but because the act of reading it in order reminded me of what was true. I was in bed by 9:30. I slept 6 hours. I woke at 5:45, showered, dressed, put on the pearl earrings. I was at Whitmore and Greer at 9:52 a.m. I was the first one there. The conference room was on the third floor, with a long mahogany table and 8 chairs and a window that looked out over the street. A paralegal named Cynthia brought me a cup of coffee and set a yellow legal pad and a pen at my place. I thanked her. I set the navy blue binder on the table to my right, and I folded my hands, and I waited. Darla and Preston arrived at 10:03. Darla was wearing a cream-colored blazer and her hair was freshly blown out, and she had on a silk scarf in a burgundy print that I recognized as expensive. She looked at me and smiled the careful smile she had been giving me for 30 years. Preston shook my hand with both of his and said it was good to see me and that he was sorry about the circumstances. I said thank you. I did not say anything else. Gerald Fitch, their attorney, arrived at 10:07 and took the seat to Preston's left without introducing himself to me. Raymond Caulfield arrived at 10:09 and nodded at me across the table with an expression I read as both professional and apologetic. The mediator, a woman named Patricia Oakes with reading glasses on a beaded chain, arrived at 10:11 and reviewed something on her notepad. The 2 paralegals from Whitmore and Greer completed the room. The Whitmore and Greer attorney, a man named Douglas Greer himself, gray-haired and deliberate, opened the proceedings at exactly 10:15. He reviewed the will. My mother had, as she had told me, left the house and its contents to Darla. She had left me the set of china and a cash bequest. The cash bequest, Douglas Greer noted, had been updated in a codicil filed in November of 2019. It was no longer $5,000. It was $1,200. I did not react. I watched Darla. She looked at the table. Douglas Greer continued. He noted that there were outstanding questions regarding the estate that had been flagged by the co-executor. That was me, and that pursuant to my filing 3 weeks prior, we would be addressing those questions before the proceedings were concluded.
He looked at me. He said, "Ms.
Calloway, you may proceed." I opened the binder. I said, "Thank you, Mr.
Greer."
My voice did not waver. I noticed that. I want to begin by saying that I am not here to contest my mother's wishes. What she chose to leave me is what she chose to leave me, and I accept it. What I am here to address is a separate matter, which concerns assets that belong to my father's estate and were transferred without proper authorization. Gerald Fitch said, "Ms. Calloway, I'm not sure this is the appropriate forum." I said, "Mr. Fitch, I have filed the appropriate documentation with the estate court in Knox County, a copy of which is in front of Mr.
Greer,
and this proceeding has been designated as the correct forum for this review. You're welcome to verify that." I did not look at him when I said it. I turned to tab 1. I read from Vera Mae's letter. Not all of it, just the relevant portions, the parts that documented what she had observed. I read from my father's affidavit. I read the bank transfer records. I read them in order, by date, by amount. The first transfer, April 12th, 1994, $15,000. The second, September 3rd, 1995, $22,000. I read all 11 transfers. They totaled $170,000. The room was very quiet. Then I turned to tab 11 and I read from Raymond Caulfield's documentation of the 2019 transfers. 9 transfers over 7 months. The total, $340,000. I noted that my mother had been assessed by her neurologist in August of 2019 as having moderate cognitive impairment, a copy of which assessment was in tab 12, obtained with proper legal authorization. Darla said, "Loretta, Mama knew what she was doing. She wanted me to have that money." I looked at her. I said, "Darla, I'm sure she did." I said it quietly. I said it without any edge at all. And somehow that was worse than an edge would have been. And I think she felt it. I said, "The question is not what Mama wanted. The question is whether assets from a joint estate account can be unilaterally transferred to a single beneficiary without co-executor authorization during the period in which the account holder has been assessed as cognitively impaired." And the answer to that question, according to the filing I have made with the estate court, is no. Preston said, "Now wait just a minute. Are you accusing my wife of something?" I turned to him. I said, "I'm not accusing anyone of anything, Preston. I'm presenting documents." Gerald Fitch said, "These records are incomplete and taken out of context." Patricia Oakes, the mediator, said, "Mr. Fitch, just his name. Nothing else."
He stopped.
Douglas Greer said,
"Ms.
"Calloway, do you have a proposed resolution?" I did. I had prepared it with Harold Stein's successor, an attorney named Margaret Falwell in Knoxville, over the course of 6 months. It was in tab 13. I read it. It was straightforward. A return to the joint estate of $255,000, not the full $340,000, because I was accounting for legitimate caregiving expenses that Darla had incurred, which I had calculated at $85,000 based on standard rates for the level of care provided. I was also not pursuing the $170,000 from the earlier transfers, as those predated my father's death and the statute of limitations had long passed. I was asking only for what was documentably owed to the joint estate, of which I was a co-beneficiary. Darla said, "You've been planning this for years." Her voice had changed. The careful warmth was gone. I said, "I've been documenting the truth for years." "That's not the same thing." She said, "Mama was right about you. She always said you held grudges." I counted 4 seconds. Then I said, "Darla, I drove to Kingsport every month for 2 years while Mama was sick. I managed her medications. I coordinated her care. I was holding her hand when she died. I don't think that's what holding a grudge looks like." Cynthia, the paralegal, was looking at her notepad. Raymond Caulfield was looking at the window. Patricia Oakes was writing something. Preston said, "We're not agreeing to anything today. Gerald, tell them we're not agreeing to anything." Gerald Fitch said, "My clients will need time to review." Douglas Greer said, "Of course. The estate court filing establishes the timeline. You have 30 days to respond." Darla stood up. She was crying, not the quiet kind, the loud kind, the kind that is meant to be witnessed. She said, "I cannot believe you are doing this to our family. After everything Mama did for you. After everything we've been through." I closed the binder. I straightened the edge of it against the table. I looked at my sister, and I felt something I had not expected to feel, which was a kind of sadness that had nothing to do with anger. I said,
Darla.
I'm not doing anything to our family. I'm asking for what's accurate. That's all I've ever asked for. She and Preston left the room. Gerald Fitch followed them without speaking. I sat for another 8 minutes while Douglas Greer and Patricia Oakes completed their notes. Raymond Caulfield stopped on his way out and shook my hand and held it for a moment and said, Your grandmother would be proud of you. I thanked him. I meant it. I drove back to Knoxville that afternoon. I stopped at a rest area on I-40 and sat in my car for 11 minutes and looked at the mountains. Thomas had pot roast in the slow cooker when I got home, and the house smelled like garlic and thyme, and I sat down at the kitchen table, and he put a plate in front of me and poured me a glass of sweet tea and sat down across from me and said, How did it go? I said, It went the way it was supposed to go. He nodded. We ate dinner. We watched the news. We went to bed. It was the most ordinary evening I can remember, and it was exactly what I needed. The estate court matter was resolved 4 months later, in July of 2021. Darla and Preston, on the advice of a second attorney they retained after Gerald Fitch withdrew from the matter. He withdrew, I later heard, due to a conflict of interest related to his prior knowledge of the 2019 transfers, agreed to a return of $230,000 to the joint estate. It was not the full $255,000 I had requested, but it was within the range Margaret Falwell had told me to expect, and I accepted it. After estate fees and taxes, my share came to $89,400. I put $45,000 of it into a scholarship fund I established at the University of Tennessee College of Nursing in Vera Mae Calloway's name. It awards $3,000 annually to a first-generation nursing student from East Tennessee. The first recipient was a 20-year-old woman from Hawkins County who wanted to work in cardiac care. I cried when I read her application essay. The good kind of crying. The house in Kingsport sold in September of 2021 for $218,000. Darla and Preston used their portion to pay off a business debt that Preston's landscaping company had accumulated. I know this because Darla told me, in a phone call that October, that surprised me with its honesty. She called to tell me the house had closed and to ask how I was doing. We talked for 22 minutes. She did not apologize. Not exactly. But she said, I think I knew, Loretta. I think I knew it wasn't right, and I just didn't want to look at it. I said, I know, she said. I don't know what to do with that. I said, You don't have to do anything with it today. We have spoken 3 times since then. It is not what sisters are supposed to be. But it is real. And real is something I have learned to value more than the performance of warmth. My mother never apologized. I did not expect her to. In her last years, in her softer moments, she would sometimes hold my hand and say my name like it meant something to her. And I chose to receive that for what it was, the most she could give, and not to need it to be more. Forgiveness, I have learned, is not a door you open for someone else. It is a room you build for yourself. So you have somewhere to live that isn't made of old pain. I built that room slowly, over many years, and I live in it now. And it is quiet, and it is mine. Thomas retired in 2019. I retired from the hospital in 2022. After 34 years in cardiac nursing, the last 12 as the director of nursing for the entire cardiovascular service line. My staff gave me a party in the conference room on the fourth floor with a sheet cake from the Publix bakery and a card signed by 61 people. I ate 2 pieces of cake. I thought about the Piggly Wiggly. I thought about Vera Mae. I did not cry until I was in my car. And then I cried for a good long while.
And it was not sadness.
It was something else. It was the feeling of a long thing being completed. We live in a house in West Knoxville with a garden out back where I grow tomatoes and collard greens. I do not have a fig tree yet, but I planted one last spring, and I talk to it sometimes. I think Vera Mae would find that appropriate. I have a shelf of books in the front room that I have read and reread, and that I add to whenever I find something worth keeping. I have a husband who makes good coffee and thinks I am funny. I have a life that is honest and warm and mine. The navy blue binder is in the top drawer of my filing cabinet. I don't open it anymore.
I don't need to.
But I keep it because Vera Mae taught me that the truth deserves to be kept somewhere safe, even after it has done its work. She also taught me something else, something I have been thinking about how to say for the whole length of this story. She taught me that the people who are passed over, the ones who are handed the sheet cake while someone else gets the homemade one, the ones who are called independent when what is really meant is inconvenient, those people are not diminished by what they are denied.
They are clarified by it.
They learn what they are made of in ways that the favored ones never have to. That is not a gift.
I want to be honest about that.
It is not a gift. It is a tax. It is an unfair tax on people who did nothing to deserve it. But what you do with what you've paid, that part is yours. That part has always been yours. If you are watching this and you recognize yourself somewhere in the story, if you have been the one who got the cupcake, the one who drove to the hospital alone, the one who built something real with no help and no net, and then watched someone else take credit for the building, I want you to hear this. You are not invisible. You have never been invisible. The people who looked past you were not seeing clearly. That is their limitation, not your worth. Document the truth. Keep it somewhere safe. Let it do its own work. And know that somewhere, there is a Vera Mae who saw you, who is still, in whatever way the dead can manage it, seeing you. That is enough. That has always been enough. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story reached you somewhere real, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And tell me what part stayed with you. Hit subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.